Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
6:06 here, 1 hour down. If you missed it, it was pretty good. Right? We had some good news. We had some
some rage moments.
Yes, exactly. And we made fun of British people.
Yeah.
So subscribe to our podcast and download it so you don't miss another moment. Coming up in just 30 minutes, Dr. Martin Kulldorff speaking truth during the COVID lockdowns. He was just fired by Harvard for speaking truth during the COVID lockdowns. 7:05, Brent Bozell. 8:05, Byron York. And at 8:35, Maryland Senator Justin Reedy. And by the way, at 7:35, we have a big WMAL announcement that we want to share with you. That's coming up alongside Julie Gunlock. My name is Larry O'Connor.
Good morning.
Good morning, Julie. Do you remember when Joe Biden came out for that emergency thrown-together press conference because he was so angry at the Robert Hur court document that said that he was unfit to serve?
Yeah, the one where he forgot about
he called Mexico and Egypt and all that stuff. He was very angry about the suggestion that he had a memory problem.
I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that?
Ooh, Clint Eastwood.
Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business.
When I was asked the question, I thought to myself, well, here his memory has failed him again because, they didn't ask him anything about his son until he brought it up. He raised it, and he was lost. The testimony, the transcripts have now been released. He was lost and confused about the date that his son died. He was asked in the transcript about the time that he was spent. He lived right across the Potomac here. I didn't know. Right off at Chainbridge Road. Right.
Yeah. Right
across the Chainbridge. I'm pointing.
I know.
I'm pointing to where we are because we're right across in the D.C. side. We're very close to the Chainbridge Road. He lived in Virginia. He had a house there. And Robert Hur, in the transcripts that have been released now, along with his testimony yesterday, he was asking, all right, so when you lived there and you're working with your ghostwriter on your book, where did you have documents? Were they here? Were they at your Penn Center? Were they, all the places they found classified documents, by the way?
Various places strewn around D.C.
And Joe Biden says, what is that, 2017, 2018? And he says, yeah. Robert Hur says, yeah. And Joe Biden says, well, you have to understand that my son, Beau, was deployed at that time or he was ailing. Well, actually, his son died in 2015.
Wow.
And he was deployed several years before that. Right. And then a little later on in that same exchange.
Just really quickly on that exchange, isn't it interesting, though? Because he was sort of making the point that I was distracted.
I was all over.
But it's interesting how he always uses Beau to get him out of these sticky situations.
That's right. Don't you That's what he did with Trump at the debate when Trump was talking about Hunter.
He did it with the Afghan, the soldiers who died in Afghanistan.
Always. His dead son is a prop.
It's a prop.
So then he does say, though, May 30th, but then he was clearly lost on the year that his son died. He has the date, May 30th. And by the way, I don't raise it a lot, but as the son of my father has Alzheimer's. This is quintessential Alzheimer's behavior that you do remember. It's like we're always amazed at the things he does remember, but he couldn't tell you what year it is. He doesn't know how old I am. He will look at me, and clearly I'm not a 30-year-old man, but in my dad's eyes, I'm 30. Yeah. Right? He doesn't. Oh. So, but he will remember dates. He'll remember. I mean, and my favorite thing to test with my dad is I'll start to tell a joke, and then I'll stop, and then he'll finish it and give me the punchline. This is my relationship with my dad, as you can imagine. But this is exactly. Of course, he remembers May 30th, but he has no idea what year or something. And suddenly, in the transcript, you'll hear unidentified voices saying 2015. It was May 30th, 2015. 2015. Yep. So, number one, he raised the death of his son. And he did not know the year that his son died, period. Because I saw, what's her name, Wei-Ling Zhang, I think, the press secretary, or the White House correspondent for CBS News, saying, well, it's understandable why Joe Biden was angry at Robert Hur because he did get the date of his son's death right, because he said May 30th. Right. She's looking at that one line, not two paragraphs ahead where he thought in 2017 or 2018.
Where his aides have to scream out the year.
Right. Also, by the way, in describing 2017, 2018, He said, well, you also have to understand, I had just left the Senate and people were encouraging me to run for president. He left the Senate in 2009. He had just left the White House. He left the vice presidency, not the Senate. So the transcript 100% validates
backs up
the
what
fact
Robert Hur said.
that this man does not have the capability to serve. All right. And it really, sheds a lot of light on that, histrionic reaction. How the hell dare he raise that issue? It's like, this is what he does. He blusters.
He does.
And starts shouting when he's cornered. That's what the State of the Union
right. That's
was
what a bully
about.
does, too.
Yeah. Jim Jordan, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, summed it up beautifully.
Mr. Hur produced a 345-page report, but in the end, it boils down to a few key facts. Joe Biden kept classified information. Joe Biden failed to properly secure classified information. And Joe Biden shared classified information with people he wasn't supposed to.
Period. That's 100% the truth. Mr. Hur backed all of those facts up.
My team and I conducted a thorough, independent investigation. We identified evidence that the president willfully retained classified materials after the end of his vice presidency when he was a private citizen. This evidence included an audio-recorded conversation during which Mr. Biden told his ghostwriter that he had, quote, just found all the classified stuff downstairs.
So that's willful and knowledge. He knew about it.
Didn't they try to destroy that tape?
Yeah, a little later on it's revealed. I think we have that that audio. Yeah, I've got that for you here. I'll tell you right now. He was asked specifically. It wasn't a tape. It was digital recording on a laptop.
What did that ghostwriter do with the information Joe Biden shared with him on his laptop? What did he do after you were named special counsel?
Chairman, if you're referring to the audio recordings that Mr. Zwanitzer created of his conversations with
exactly
Mr. Biden,
what I'm referring to.
He slid, if I remember correctly, he slid those files into his recycle bin on his computer.
Tried to destroy the evidence, didn't he?
Correct.
Yeah. So, and by the way, and I just want to reflect on what Kash Patel said yesterday here, because Robert Hur is not the hero here. Robert Hur is not the good guy. Robert Hur is detailing destruction of evidence and obstruction of justice by a key witness, and he did nothing about it, and downplaying it. He slid those files into recycle bin. Yeah. No, that's deleting a file.
Yeah, exactly. Also, let's remember, this ghostwriter ends up writing a book. Biden profited off this book, the contents which contained classified information.
Yeah.
Biden,
it's not like the Biden family to profit off
$8 million from this book.
That no one read.
Right. Good point.
Yeah.
It was all purchased by the Penn Center.
Well, it's just because we're nothing if not fair and balanced here, as you know. Jerry Nadler, the ranking member, when he's not trying to destroy Gotham by fighting the Cape Crusader, he is trying to ask questions on behalf of his party, the Democratic Party. So he had a great moment there where he had a great gotcha where he wanted to get it on the record that Joe Biden never lied to Robert Hur. Here's how that went.
At any point in your investigation, did you have any reason to believe that President Biden lied to you?
I do address in my report one response the president gave to a question that we had posed to him that we deemed to be not credible.
You know that whole thing where you never ask a question that you don't already know the answer to? Exactly. At any point, did you ever believe that Joe Biden lied to you? Actually, yeah. It's right there in the report.
But honestly, it was just going back to your Hur commentary and criticism. Yeah. The answer wasn't yes. The answer was
exactly.
Like, well,
we found one of his answers not credible.
Which is yes.
That's yes. He lied, but did he get charges brought against him for?
No,
of course not. Did anybody get charges for obstruction of justice? Yeah. Did anybody get for destroying evidence? No. Hur is not the hero here. Hur saluted smartly and did his job. He did just enough to allow the Democrats, if they need to remove Joe Biden. They got enough reason to remove him now. But now the Democrats and the Biden campaign can say, oh, that's old news. You're bringing it up. We've already had that. And he's a partisan Republican anyway. And guess what? Within 6 months or a year, Robert Hur is going to have a really well-paying partnership with a law firm in Washington, D.C., because that's the reward they get. More of yesterday's testimony. And we want to show you how the Democrats sure had their talking points memorized for their questioning of Robert Hur. That's coming up in a moment. First, though, at 6:15.
Mark Levin, weeknights from 6 till 9.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Mr. Hur,
classified documents were found at the Penn Biden Center?
That's correct.
They were found in President Biden's garage?
In Wilmington, Delaware, yes.
And in his basement den?
Also in the same home, yes.
In his main floor office?
Correct.
And his third floor den?
Correct.
At the University of Delaware?
Correct.
And at the Biden Institute?
Correct.
Everybody's scratching their heads and trying to, twist themselves into a pretzel and, try to rationalize the fact that no charges were brought against Joe Biden, and yet charges were brought against Donald Trump, and he's, having to defend himself before the election with a special prosecutor. Well, it's very different. It's very, very different. Yeah, it's different, all right. You just heard where Joe Biden recklessly and negligently left classified documents strewn about in 7 different locations all across the mid-Atlantic.
All unsecure.
All unsecure.
Yeah, and I saw yesterday someone on Twitter was like, well, Biden had 8 documents, which it was more than 8.
No.
Then Trump had 8 boxes locked in a room, right?
In a room.
Whereas Biden profited off $8 million by giving this ghostwriter
access to classified information. It's not like the Biden family to make money off of classified documents or inside information. Donald Trump did have, it appears, classified information, which, by the way, many will argue he had every right to attain because he was president.
Yeah.
They were in one room,
right,
locked in an office with Mar-a-Lago security and Secret Service patrol.
That's right.
So if you're really trying to find the difference between the two, that's the difference between the two. That did not stop the Democrats from, first of all, attacking Robert Hur for daring to suggest that Joe Biden is anything less than perfectly sound and perfect. I mean, after all, just hear from the president himself.
Authoritarian thugs all around the world.
Yeah, exactly. He's perfect. Jerry Nadler, they all have the same word. Jerry Nadler, Jayapal, all across the board, they all use the same language. Exonerated. Exonerated was the word of the day. If you were taking a shot every time you heard exonerated, you were a blotto. You were like Hunter Biden in the champagne room at the strip club.
I believe, as is his habit, that President Biden probably committed a verbal slip or two during the interview.
Oh, a verbal slip.
And I'm not sure any of that matters, because when the interview was over, Mr. Hur completely exonerated President Biden.
Yeah, Mr. Hur hated it when they kept saying that. And at this point, with Congresswoman Jayapal, he actually interrupted at one point and said, enough of this exonerated thing. My job was not to exonerate anybody.
And an investigation resulted in a complete exoneration of President Joe Biden. For every document you...
By the way, they're all reading this,
I know. Yeah.
It was all prepared for them.
Yep.
discussed in your report, you found insufficient evidence that the president violated any laws about possession or retention of classified materials. The primary law that you analyzed for potential prosecution was part of the Espionage Act, 18 U.S.C. 793E, which criminalizes willful retention or disclosure of national defense information. Is that correct?
Congresswoman, that is one statute that we analyzed. I need to go back and make sure that I take note of the word that you used, exoneration. That is not a word that
I'm
going to
continue with my questions. I'm going to continue with my questions. I know that the term
I ultimately reached
I know that
whether
the term
sufficient evidence existed such that the likely outcome
you exonerated
would be a conviction.
I know that the
not
term
exonerate
willful
him. That word does not appear in
retention
the
has a
report,
Mr. Hur, it's my time. Thank you.
Beautiful, isn't it?
It is. And she talked over him on purpose so that there isn't a clear...
Yeah, and by the way, where's Chairman Jordan with the gavel at that moment?
know.
But, he can't be perfect. It's all right. We love the guy. Matt Gaetz was on fire. And by the way, Matt Gaetz, thank you, one of the few people up there who said, Mr. Hur, you just testified that the ghostwriter destroyed evidence after you were named prosecutor. What in the hell does someone have to do to be
where are the charges against this guy?
With obstruction of justice here? But there was also this.
February 8th, the White House question, Mr. President, why did you share classified information with your ghostwriter? The President, I did not share classified information. I did not share it. I guarantee I did not. That's not true, is it, Mr. Hur?
That is inconsistent with the findings based on the evidence in my report.
Yes, it's a lie. It's just what regular people would say.
It's a lie. That is
right.
inconsistent with the evidence of the...
And all the stuff that was in my home was in filing cabinets that were either locked or able to be locked. That wasn't true either, was it?
That was inconsistent with the findings of our investigation.
Another lie, people might say, right? Because What you put in your report was among the places Mr. Biden's lawyers found classified documents in the garage was a damaged open box. So here's what I'm understanding, right? As Mr. Armstrong laid out, you find in your report that the elements of a federal criminal violation are met. But then you apply this senile cooperator theory that because Joe Biden cooperated and the elevator doesn't go to the top floor, you don't think you can get a conviction.
I love it.
It
Good
is
for him.
perfectly put. It's true. The evidence absolutely is there that he violated the law willfully, knowingly on multiple occasions, but because he cooperated with the investigation
and is senile,
and his brain doesn't work.
What do we say?
Mashed
potato brains.
Mashed potato brains. Then he's not going to get here. And that's basically the summary of what happened yesterday on Capitol Hill. 6:23.
Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
6:37. It's O'Connor and Company here on this beautiful Wednesday morning in the nation's capital, and it is going to be a beautiful day too. Just in time for us to kick a little butt across this morning show extravaganza. At 7:05, Brent Bozell of Media Research Center will be here. At 8:05, Byron York of the Washington Examiner. At 8:35, Maryland Senator Justin Reedy. And also, by the way, at 7:35, we've got an announcement about WMAL that you might want to pay attention to. It's good news. You're going to like it. Alongside Julie Gunlock. My name is Larry O'Connor.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jules. It was March 10th, 2020. I just want to tell you a quick story here because I honestly, I am shocked that during this election year, more attention is not paid on the conduct of elected officials during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I feel like in some cases in 2022 it was. I think that's why Ron DeSantis had such an enormous victory in Florida.
Yeah.
But the fact that it is just forgotten now, it's memory hold.
It's on purpose.
And I wonder if the Trump people are like, yeah, well, it wasn't our best moment. Maybe we shouldn't talk about it. But I think that he should. I think it would be very smart for him to say, listen, I think I did a good job. I did my best. I followed advice. But I realize now I got bad advice and things were hidden from me. If you make me president, I'm going to start a commission immediately to investigate everything. The American people deserve to know everything that went on in the decision-making process of the pandemic.
Yeah, and I think it would be good for him to show a little humility and say, I made missteps. But it's interesting because the left is always giving grace. They love to say that.
Right.
That we needed to give grace to people at the beginning of the pandemic. And the truth is, I believe that. I think at the very beginning, we really didn't know. There were a lot of sort of reversals, and I was willing to agree to that. I thought we don't know, but Trump saying, look, there were some mistakes made early on, but it was as it went on, that, and especially at the point where we knew kids were not really catching this disease, they were not really struggling with this disease. All of that. That is where we need to investigate.
And again, this is less about winning an election as it is about we, the American people, deserving to have a full accounting of what happened. Because this single event, along with 9/11, affected our lives.
People's lives were destroyed. Their businesses were destroyed. Children are going to be dealing with this learning loss for generations.
Right.
People died alone in hospitals.
And you know who saw all this coming? It brings me back to what I was going to say. It was 4 years ago this week, March 10th. I remember St. Patrick. It was like March 17th, 18th, 19th, when the president called for 15 days to slow the spread.
Yeah.
But 2 weeks before that, March 10th.
Mm-hmm.
So a week before that, Harvard shut down operations.
Really?
Did you know that?
Wow, no.
And other colleges and universities started to follow suit because Harvard had done that. And that was part of the steamrolling effect. I remember the NBA also shut down operations.
That's right. In the middle of a game.
In the middle of a game. And 3 days later, Trump took the podium and said, 15 days to slow the spread. And on March 10th, when Harvard shut down operations, there was one voice that happened to be right there in Cambridge, right there. His name was Dr. Martin Kulldorff. He was a professor at the Department of Medicine. He was a biostatistician. He was an epidemiologist. His job at Harvard was to be an expert on how diseases spread and, more importantly, how to keep diseases from spreading. Yep. And right then and there, he said, guys, this ain't going to do it.
We're going too far.
Well, actually, what he said was, it doesn't matter.
Right.
He was watching the numbers. He was watching the spread. He understood the math of it. And he said, nothing will stop this. What we got to do is find treatments, take care of the people who catch it, figure out who's most vulnerable, And eventually, the best thing for people is natural immunity.
Yes.
That's the only thing that's going to stop
Which
this thing.
is-
And by the way, shutting down our schools, shutting down our economy, it's going to create much worse harm. It's going to have much bigger ramifications
also,
for people.
the thing is,
and now, and I just want to tie this up. Here we are 4 years later to the week, and he just got fired by Harvard.
Right.
He just got fired by Harvard because he continued to do his job.
Because the people who were right.
Be an expert. And when the vaccine mandates come out, he said, this is not a vaccine. This is not going to, we should stop lying to people. And he's been fired.
And you think about that alternative reality. If we had really focused on treatments, if, for instance, they had said those in vulnerable categories, okay, those with other comorbidities, if you're overweight, if you are older, you should probably shut down. Okay, you should probably stay in your house, order your groceries online, wipe them down, wear a mask from now until eternity.
And we'll focus our government resources to help you.
Yes.
But
imagine that alternative. Kids would have stayed in school. You know, we could have still gotten teachers vaccinated early so they could have returned. It is so horrible. And what's so sad is, you know, this kind of investigation could come to those conclusions, you know, that could really say, like, let's create a roadmap if this happens again. And it's going to happen again.
Kulldorff was a prominent opponent of vaccine mandates and school closures during the entire COVID-era debate about the regulation of schools and businesses. He, along with Professor Sunetra Gupta at Oxford University, very different Gupta, by the way, at Oxford University, and Stanford's Jay Bhattacharya, released the Great Barrington Declaration in 2020.
Yep.
Arguing for age-based focused protection instead of universal lockdowns, with specific suggestions for how better to protect the elderly while letting children and young adults live close to normal lives. Because we knew early on, I remember being on the radio in June, because it was the end of the school year, saying, because we're going to cancel graduation. And we knew then that children miraculously had dodged the COVID bullet. We knew based on, it's an easy thing to know.
Oh, we knew.
It's an easy thing to know because you can just see who's being admitted to the hospital with severe symptoms.
Randy Weingarten and the teachers union saw it as an opportunity for leverage and to get more money.
Well, and to isolate Trump. I think 95% of this was to create chaos so that people were angry because people were happy. People loved our economy. People were happy with the state of affairs going into 2020. And they had this opportunity to make people angry. And if people are angry, then they're going to vote against the incumbent. It's just time for a change.
Yep.
All right. A little bit more on what happened here with Dr. Kulldorff, what he said at the time. And, well, now he's been fired by Harvard for it. It's 6:44.
Making sense of your world.
Talk radio is where I get all of my information.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
The declaration at the time in 2020 made clear that no scientific consensus existed for school closures and many other lockdown measures. In response, attacks on Dr. Kulldorff intensified and even grew slanderous. Coupled with the fact that he said that our immune system is so beautiful because those who recover from an infection are protected if and when they are re-exposed. That sort of flew in the face of the march toward the vaccine, regardless of what your natural immunity was. For all of his efforts in speaking the truth and being right all along, Dr. Kulldorff is now unemployed. From Harvard Medical School, at least. And he joins us now. Dr. Martin Kulldorff, hopefully you're not actually unemployed. I'm thinking with your resume you might get a gig.
Well, I do have some income, so that's good. So.
Okay. Is it as simple as that? I mean, do they give you a reason for this dismissal? Because, I mean, last I checked, it's impossible to fire a professor at a major university. I mean, even if they're criminals, they won't get fired with tenure.
Well, they were unhappy with me for quite some time, and they didn't allow any debates or discussions of these things, which I think is very bad for a university. But the ultimate reasons was a disagreement about infection-acquired immunity.
Wow.
So we have known since 430 BC during the Athenian plague that once you recover from an infectious disease, you have a protection from the immune system. So next time you get infected, either you don't get sick or it's much more milder.
I learned that in elementary school. How is it possible that at Harvard there is as you just put it, disagreement over natural immunity.
It's astonishing. Maybe you should be the president of Harvard.
No, I don't plagiarize enough for that gig.
What do you make of your medical community? I mean, this is a community that you're a part of, and there are a few voices like yours that have called out the policies that, closed schools, kept a mask, I can go on and on. But there really hasn't been a look back. There hasn't been any kind of commissions on this to look back on what happened and to ensure it doesn't happen again. What do you make of that? And also the reputation of public health in this country. People just don't trust doctors. They don't trust medical officials. If you could kind of give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there has to be some kind of a commission. And there is one in Florida and one in New Hampshire, but there needs to be one at the federal level to regain that trust. Because right now, to be honest, the public health community doesn't deserve the trust, or the scientific community doesn't deserve the trust. And if you don't allow discussions, if you limit discussions about scientific ideas, then the scientific process doesn't work anymore. So the taxpayers are paying billions of dollars for medical research, including over $1 billion a year to Mass General Brigham Hospital system, which is the Harvard-affiliated system where I worked. And if they can't uphold academic freedom and discussions and debate, then the taxpayers are not getting their money's worth.
We've been trying to speculate about why the so-called scientific and academic communities, if it really is a community, were so adamant about their agenda here, even so far as to not only ignoring you, but ostracizing you and now ultimately dismissing you. Some people think it's the big money with pharmaceuticals or money associated with the medical system in America in general. Some people think it's politics. Disruption actually aided the election that ended up changing the political representation in the White House. You were in the middle of it. What do you think motivated what you faced, what you continue to face?
I think those are all good theories, but that's a question of sort of the political aspects, and I'm a simple scientist, so I'm just astonished by it. But the thing is that while there were very few people speaking up, the majority of my colleagues who I spoke to in person agreed with me. But a lot of people didn't dare to speak up, for good reasons, because they have their livelihoods and their families to think about. So there is a situation where there is no open discussion, and it should be open and polite. It could be very passionate, but it should be polite without slander. And that discussion has to occur in academia.
What you just said, there's many people who, believe something else, but if they speak up, they're threatening their livelihood. I hear scientists say the same thing about theories over climate change, man-made climate change, carbon emissions, things like that. You hear the same theories about a lot of other things that are supposed.
The transgender issue.
Yeah, the transgender issue, where supposedly it's science-based, but there's big money behind it and there's big politics behind it, and
there's legitimate concerns about the way we're going.
Yeah.
But if you raise those,
and then this is a trend, Doctor. Within the scientific community, given the money and power that's connected to it.
Yeah, I think that there is issues about pharmaceutical has a lot of influence over science because they fund they also do fund universities. And of course, NIH funds so much. So during the pandemic, we have a situation where the NIH director, Francis Collins, and the NIAID Director Anthony Fauci, they sit on the biggest piles of research funding in the world. So if they are saying something very strong about the pandemic, it's very difficult for scientists to stand up against that, even no matter how wrong they are.
It really is as simple as follow the money in this case. But the ramification. I mean, you wrote so early on, and I used it as research material for my radio program. You foresaw exactly the ramifications of this sweeping lockdown. You saw the learning loss and cancer patients who would not get screening or not get treatment. I mean, we're going to be feeling the effects of this bad decision for decades, aren't we?
We are, and it's really bad, and we really did a huge disservice to our children. If I could change one thing There are many things I would like to change, but if I could only pick one, it would be to keep the schools open.
Agreed.
The test results has gone down, but it's not just the test results, it's also the social development, because kids need other kids to hang out with.
Dr. Martin Kulldorff, we have to leave it there. I'd love to have you back because we haven't even touched on, most of our discussion today was about the scientific community and the public health aspects. There's a big scandal here brewing in academia. You've been in the middle of that at Harvard as well over the last 6 months. And that's also incredibly detrimental to our future and to our culture. I'd love to have you back to talk about that aspect of it, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You bet. What's next for you, by the way? How can people find you and see what your next steps are?
Well, I'm involved in the Academy for Science and Freedom, which is the Hillsdale Initiative. So if you Google Academy for Science and Freedom, you can find that. That's work with Jay Bhattacharya, who you mentioned, and also Scott Atlas.
And Scott Atlas. Oh, excellent. Okay, Dr. Martin Kulldorff, formerly of Harvard, but now, frankly, I think in a better place, the Academy of Freedom and Science, or Science and Freedom. Nice to have both of those connected. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.